Our next speaker needs no introduction. Joerg Hofmann, who is senior partner at Melchers Law, is a leading gambling lawyer in Germany. Joerg, welcome and thank you for being here.
Guten Morgen und herzlich willkommen. So that was it in German. We now move to English. Very welcome to all of you. Let me first mention there was this poll. Are you optimistic? Are you slightly optimistic? Are you pessimistic? We've not seen the results now, but I can tell you I voted partly optimistic. That's what I think what we all can be. Why is that so? First of all, we have regulation that allows licensing in Germany. Looking back for some years, and we have to look to 2019 and before, there was a total prohibition on online gaming in Germany. No licensing regime available, at least not for the whole country, apart from Schleswig-Holstein in these days. You remember the Schleswig-Holstein Gaming Act? I think it was 2012, 2013 when it came in force. That was the first step into online gaming regulation and first experiences. But it took our legislator, politicians and regulators a long time to approach this market by way of regulation. And since there are 16 German states, which we call the German Länder, I can tell you this is not an easy project because you have very reluctant politicians saying we do not want to regulate gaming at all. And then there are those like Schleswig-Holstein who made good experiences in regulating because they thought if I regulate, if I supervise, I can protect. So the interstate treaty, which forms the basis of our regulation, is nothing else than a compromise. Is nothing else than a beginning of a development that needs to be further developed. And also this is not easy because you see regulators, after many, many years, being after this industry, being after the illegal operators. Illegal means not licensed in Germany, maybe licensed elsewhere, maybe licensed in Malta, Gibraltar, Isle of Man, or wherever. And then overnight, there was a change in regulation, and some of these people, some of these regulators, had to make a U-turn in order to now license, legalize, and support this industry, which has been treated as an enemy, the political enemy for so many years. This being done within one generation is a challenge. We're not doing best, but we're trying to improve. What I think is key is the dialogue between regulators and the industry. I will touch on this later. We have to consider the GGL, our super regulator now, who regulates for Germany, not only for a single state, took over responsibility at 1st January in 2022. That is not a long time. So we are still in a period of where everything begins. And we see there are issues, but we also see both sides try to improve, try to work together and make things better because there is one common goal, that is to make the license market strong, make it competitive, and fight the black market operators. There is still a black market. There's a huge black market. And Mr. Schwanke just said it's hard to estimate the share of the black market. And if there are figures published, you can always question them. And they are so different, so contradictory. But the operators know they lost a lot of turnover, a lot of stakes, a lot of percentage to black market operators. And this is still the case. So there's a common goal to protect the industry in order to protect the player. That is one of these challenges. We can also figure out that all these licensing procedures, which were our daily business last year, are now done. There are finalized licenses are granted. We know the figures. I'll repeat it, it's 31 for sports betting, 40 for virtual slot machine games, 5 for online poker, and 0 for online casino games. For those of you who are not familiar with the distinction between online casino games and virtual slot machine games, in your jurisdiction outside of Germany, it might be the same. It's the casino game, it's the slot. But in Germany, there's a distinction. online casino games is not part of the interstate treaty regulation for private operators on a nationwide basis. It is reserved for the states, for the lenders, the 16 lenders in Germany, to pass legislation and decide whether online casino games, which are bank holder games, those you find in live games areas in the land-based casinos, such as roulette, baccarat, blackjack, for instance, whether they want to grant these licenses by way of a monopoly to state-owned and state-run companies, or at the same time, they could do it by way of a tender to private operators. Only Schleswig-Holstein and North Rhine-Westphalia so far decided to start this tender. Schleswig-Holstein has done it already. North Rhine-Westphalia is in the process of preparing it for next year. That means, at the moment, there's no single license available on the market for offering roulette games or baccarat blackjack games. Whenever a player in Germany wants to play these specific games, he has to go outside and find these games in the black market. After 1st of July 2021, when the licensing regime started, this is not something that amuses us, but it takes time, of course. The topics in 2022 were licensing regimes. The topics in 2023, basically, among them was LUGAS. LUGAS is the service system technology. We have three different parts of LUGAS. One is the deposit limit server, which formed a lot of discussions at the beginning of this year because GGL expected every operator to be connected at 1st of January 2023. But let me say, as a gaming lawyer, obviously there was some sort of miscommunication, and there was, I would say, a gap between 2022 and 2023, because in 2022, the regional council in Darmstadt was responsible for sports betting operators. Those were the license holders. And the communication was different, and everybody thought, well, probably we will be informed when it will be working. It doesn't work. But GGL didn't recognize what happened in 2022, so there was some miscommunication. I think this is now fixed and okay. Next one was parallel playing. The service system avoids that one player can play two games at the same time or opens two tabs, which makes a lot of sense in order to protect players against becoming addicted or even taking the risk of players' addiction. But the big thing about LUGAS is the safe service system. We're still working on it. Those technical guidelines needed to be amended and amended and amended. It took a lot of time. There is a deadline in your license, which is 3 months to be connected after the issuing of a license. It's still something that takes more time, and the work to program this is just challenging. Deadlines have expired, but GDL seems to understand this is more a technical issue. It's not a compliance issue. So we are in a process of discussing these, and the regulator seems to be a partner who understands how technology works. And I think we get this settled as well. The issues in our current regulatory environment that was waiting for a long time to get deposit limits exemptions. With sports betting in the licenses, there were some ancillary provisions saying it's possible to grant exemptions for the individual players' deposit limits per month. The standard is €1,000 per player per month. The exceptions could be up to €10,000 or between 10,000 and 30,000 euros. Under an advanced extended monitoring proceeding, this is possible. For sports betting, we were familiar with this because it's part of our licenses. For virtual slots, it took a long time to get these deposit limits granted by the authority. The good news is it happened just recently, just a few weeks ago. GGL granted these, I would say, well, similar limits. The tiers are still standard 1,000, 10,000 for first tier, and then up to 30,000, but more detailed. It's a very long license. It's a very long permission, detailed and auxiliary provisions, more than with sports betting. I expect this might be synchronized very soon. And so we can grant this. And it's important to know that the deposit service system, the limit system, will check these limits for every single player in real time, cross-operator based. So if I like to deposit 10,000 euros with one operator, Lugas will immediately check whether I have this budget available for me or whether I have exceeded it, and then it will be refused. The system is in place and the system works, and it caused a lot of discussions. But now we can say for slot machines, it works as well. A big issue, and still not a resolved issue, is the size of betting markets and betting events where players can place bets on. Mr. Schwanke told us it's quite a lot if you look at the amount of bets with every operator. That's correct. But if you compare the so-called permitted betting catalog at the moment with what is available in black market operations or which was available before licenses provided these restrictions, or simply to say what is demanded by the players, then there's a big gap between competitiveness with black market operators and with those who demand to have several bets. I'm not talking about bets that have a certain risk of, well, causing harm to sports integrity. This is no doubt something that cannot be approved. But there are many bet types, many leagues, which are simply demanded. And I think we should make sure that the player can find what he's looking for in the regulated market and not just outside. A challenge for GTL in the future, a challenge for the industry. But as I said before, I'm partly optimistic that we will get these things done as well. The black market, I mentioned that, is still there, and it's still the main competitor of the regulated market and the biggest threat against player protection. I think the mission or the message can only be, we can only protect players if they play with us, if they play in a regulated, supervised environment where support and help is offered, where monitoring takes place. Every player, you know this, I don't have to say that, but every player who's playing outside in the black market has no protection at all. And that is something we always have to keep in mind. Only competitive regulation allows player protection. The best theoretical approach to regulate doesn't work, doesn't reach out to a single player if the player plays outside. Last year, there was a lot of litigation pending, same as this year, but it's different sort of litigation. And last year, there were litigation cases, administrative court proceedings dealing with the regional council in Darmstadt as the main responsible regulator for sports betting licensing back in 2020, 21, and 22. And at the end of the year, we concluded to make a settlement. There were many ancillary provisions appealed. It was more or less litigation where we looked at the basics, the standards, which is probably not acceptable for this industry, which probably makes no sense to accept. To give you an example, you might think differently about it, but a very small example which shows how one can understand these items, these issues, is the bonus regulation. In these licenses, you find an ancillary provision saying the maximum bonus per player per month is 100 euro. Well, if you compare this to the main competition, which is black market competition, it's nothing. It's an instrument to channel the market. It does channel the market, but it channels the market into the opposite direction. So I think almost every operator saw the need to appeal these ancillary commission, among others, and it's still also this pending. We still have this discussion as a suspensive effect now because the courts haven't rendered any decisions so far. But with the regional council, the industry concluded a settlement that was signed. Settlement means we have some, maybe 2 court proceedings still pending, and we concluded some conditions, including the catalog of bet types so far with a restricted number, and then see how the courts will deal with it and probably take this into the next instance of courts. But the idea behind it and the expectation of the industry was, well, in 2023, probably the new regulated GGL has the power to sit down together with us at a table to discuss these things and try to reach a solution that serves to end all this litigation and also to find cooperative, constructive ways, not wishful thinking, but things that make sense and discuss on a level of competence. I think GGL is open-minded to lead these discussions, but my personal opinion, and I'll say this is really my personal opinion, GGL has one issue. It's an authority that works for Germany, that has the power to work nationwide, but it's not a federal office. It's an authority based on Länder law, based on an interstate treaty signed by all these lenders. And when we remember last year, there was the impact of the Glücksspielkollegium, which you can create as gambling committee, and they told the regulators what to do, what not to do, and how to decide. Caused a lot of delays, caused a lot of, in my view, really stupid decisions, which caused a lot of harm to the industry and the competitiveness of this industry as well. Officially, the Glücksspielkollegium is gone. They lost their position, be replaced by an administrative board, Verwaltungsrat, represented by the state chancellors of 16 lenders. These are politicians, so they might seek advice, competence advice, back with the regulators, which are those who formed the gambling committee. We see at the moment, it still looks like there is a lot of impact, political impact, drawn by the lenders, by these 16 states of the German state, and do not allow the regulator to make a decision if this decision is not in line with the political interest or the compromise, the political compromise of all these lenders. In my view, that is my expectation, this causes delays. And sometimes you see the regulator says, I would like to decide this way, but probably I've been told the other way is what I have to decide to. I'm wishing that the politicians understand a strong regulator can only make strong decisions and regulate if you leave them the power to make this decision. And let the regulators not feel, well, am I safe in doing this, or do I have to look up to the impact coming from behind, coming from the background? I moderated a panel on Monday with 5 regulators from 5 various jurisdictions during a conference in Cyprus. And I was really excited to learn from one regulator saying the biggest mistake regulation and legislation does is that the legislator does not consult the regulator before drafting new law and before the regulator could consult with the industry. Wow, this should happen in Germany. This is my prayer for today. And now, Lufthansa inland flight conditions 0. Thank you very much for your attention.
Joerg, can you please stay for a moment? Because I think we have 1 or 2 audience questions looking at your amazing expertise here. So if we can have the first question. Joerg, what in your opinion is the least helpful piece of regulation, and what would you suggest in its place?
Oops, it's limited to one helpful piece.
Quick question.
There could be more. It's hard to answer this question. I think it's not a single piece of legislation where I'd say this is wrong. I think it's the construction itself. It's the interstate treaty trying to find so many compromises, which is understandable because that was the necessary first step to get it done. But for me, as I said, we need more power for the regulators. And I also think the evaluation, the assessment of our regulation by the end of 2026, that is too late because then we lost so many players and channelization opportunities. There will be a first part of evaluation by the end of last year. And I think we should sit together with the regulator and see that also the assessment of the industry, because we are with the player and the market, is taken into consideration. I hope that is fine with that answer.
Thank you, Joerg. Long question. Joerg, second question and the last question for this session. What evidence do you have relative to the go next door issue, the growth of the black market? Can you share if you have no means of measuring it?
That's a good question. I cannot disclose any details, but what I like to answer if this question comes up we are working with many operators. We're also working with many suppliers, those who develop software and those who transfer the software, to license the software to operators. We can simply use the compared figures before the regulation came into force. How big was the gross gaming revenue of the operator? Then during the transitional period when operators try to adopt to the requirements provided with the guidelines, and then to now. And they also have figures from operators who never amended, who never adopted the requirements, who are black market operators, at least some of them. And you can compare the figures, and our take was that I would say 60 to 80% were lost. Don't know whether that's still the case, but I don't think we are far away from it. And we saw operators skyrocketing when they collected all the players from licensed or during the licensing process, changing operators in Germany. And that is not a clear number, but that's an impression that it is massive.
Thank you, Joerg. It was very interesting and entertaining to hear your thoughts. Thank you very much.
Likewise. Hope you're enjoying the conference.
Thank
Thanks
you.
for having me.